Welcome to Quilling It, where authors spill the ink on writing, publishing, and promoting your book in today's market.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I am Paul Regner.
And I'm Lindsay Franklin.
And this is our last podcast episode of the year, and it is taking place during Christmas time.
Yay!
Does that sound like jingle bells? This is kind of a sad jingle. This is sort of a broken jingle bell. I was trying to get Christmassy. Sounds more like something on the neck of a cow. Okay, sorry about that.
Well, you've got your wreath in the background. So
I got the wreath in the background. That's right.
Yeah.
I got something going on. I was trying to be festive, and that sort of failed. Merry Christmas to everyone out there. Merry Christmas. Lindsay, do you guys you and your family have like Christmas traditions, that sort of favorite traditions that you do every year?
Yes, I love Christmas time. One of my favorite times of the year. So one of our big traditions, we always like to do some kind of big cookie thing in our house, where whether it's decorating Christmas cookies, we've done that a lot of years. Last year we bought gingerbread house kits. So less baking for me. Whenever we do Christmas cookies, I want them to actually be really tasty too. And so I always bake them. But less work for me when we buy the kits, and the houses are not necessarily meant to be eaten, but they're really fun to decorate. And so
they kind of taste like cardboard, don't they?
Yes, they do. Tastes like eating a real house with drywall and everything. Yeah, it's not pleasant. Not pleasant, but super fun to decorate. And so my kids are all old now. Like my baby, she's a Christmas baby, born just a few days after Christmas. And so she is turning 18 this year. Which is just wild. My kids will be 18 to 25. That's the span that I've got right now. So as they've gotten older, these traditions have evolved a little bit. And so the houses have become really fun to do as they can kind of do more of that on their own. And so sometimes we'll have their, friends or people over to do that. So that's really fun. Something I always look forward to.
They're building like skyscrapers now out of all the gingerbread.
Right. Doing
It's
really
way more
creative
advanced
things, or referencing some meme or whatever in their decorations.
Right.
Teens are so fun. I love teens and young adults.
They're using AutoCAD to design their gingerbread house. Well, very cool. Oh, and I've got, you're drinking out of your mug. I'm going to say I got my Christmas mug. There we go. For all the YouTube.
So festive.
You're
so festive. I just have my wombat in the background, who I always have. He's always there. But I have Christmas nails. That's all I've got, guys.
Oh, Christmas nails. Wait, let's see the Christmas nails.
Okay.
The YouTube
Christmas
people
nails.
have to see.
Yes. They are red and gold for everybody who's just listening to us.
Oh, that's good. And I've got my green Christmas pullover because Hallmark said I had to wear a pullover for Christmas, so I put that on.
Hallmark said.
Well, hey, so this is sort of the last podcast of the year. We thought we'd do something a little fun. We're going to talk about our favorite childhood books that really made an impact on us early on in our formative years. And we thought not only would that be fun, but it's also kind of a lesson that we can take to heart as authors, that when we write something, it can really be impactful for young readers out there, and it can really kind of shape the way, or even I don't want to overstate things, right? This book could change their lives, maybe, but
maybe.
Even sometimes I think we aim so high, or we get so intimidated by those high goals that we forget about just a great goal of lifting someone's spirits. What if you could write something that a young reader, maybe they're having a tough time, and they can sort of lose themselves in your book for a while. If you have this fun adventure, or maybe there's something funny about it, or something that can really just kind of lift them up after a tough day or a tough time in their life. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about that?
100% agree. And as a child, books were really that for me. All media really, or stories, I should say. Story was like a place that I went to that was safe for me. My childhood had, a fair amount of trauma and just things that were hard. And so that's where I escaped, was into stories. And so it really, and that it's a place where before I knew the Lord, that was a place where kind of he met me and spoke to me before I even knew who he was through
Mm,
stories of authors who may not have even had that on their minds or their hearts as they were writing, but that was the way it was used to reach me. And so it just,
mm,
story is so powerful, and it doesn't matter if we're not writing the next classic, because most of us aren't. I mean,
right.
when I say that, I mean 99.9999%, right? Of all writers and storytellers throughout all of history, most of us are not writing classics, but that does not mean that our stories are not powerful. And I think as readers, because we're all readers too, you all know what I'm talking about, like, because
Hmm.
we've had stories that just hit us and reach us. And you'll see for both of our lists here that it's not always the big classics. Sometimes it is. That's why those books become classics, because they hit people that way for a long period of time. A lot of people over a lot of years, that's what makes a classic. But those are not the only stories that reach readers in that way and touch people that way. So we have the very rare privilege of potentially doing that as authors. So super cool
Yeah.
thing to talk about and think about.
No, definitely, definitely. So today, each of us has picked sort of our three favorite books of childhood, books that impacted us in some way. And again, these might not be like the big classics of all time, but they just meant something to us. And we're going to do a little bit of visual for the YouTube watchers, because we're going to show the covers and kind of show how cool the books, because I love book covers. And um,
Yes.
but why don't you want to kick us off there, Lindsay, and start with your first book?
Sure. And if anybody who is listening has read The Unraveling of Emlyn Dulaine, this is going to be no big surprise. The first one that I'm going to talk about, which is, let me see if I can do this without smashing my microphone. Okay. Yes. This
Oh,
is The Wizard of Oz. Now, this particular thing that I'm holding up is super thick with the shiny green
wow, that's a nice
pages
hardcover.
there, which is really cool. This is the like Barnes and Noble, their classic oh, what do you call them? Like they have these hardcovers that they've done all these classics in these beautiful hardcovers, and they're
Yeah.
super affordable and just really cool. So I always love that table when I walk into Barnes and Noble
Yeah,
and it's
I
got
have
all
some of
these
those
cool
too.
things.
They're really cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it. A lot of my copies of books, the ones that I did own, did not survive all the way into adulthood, and so I've like been backfilling my collection a bit with some of these. And my family did not have a lot of money when I was little, and so I was a library reader. So some of
Mm.
my favorites and things that I were very impactful for me as a kid, have never owned those books, which is crazy to think about now. Like, why haven't you gone and bought all of them? I don't know. Half of them are probably out of print at this point, but I was a library kid, and so it's fun to backfill the collection and kind of fill up the shelves now as an adult. But yeah,
Yeah.
so The
Well,
Wizard of
so now,
Oz.
now, Wizard of Oz. What was it in particular about Wizard of Oz that kind of meant something to you or spoke to you? And how old
Yes.
were you when you read it, roughly?
Oh, wow. I can actually visualize being in my library as a kid, my little local library, and wandering over to the children's shelf and like pulling it off of the shelf for the first time because I read
Wow.
The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, book one. A lot of people don't know that the Oz books, there are, I think, 14 that L.
What? I
Frank.
didn't know that.
Yes,
Huh.
yes, it's true. So, this big fat hardcover that I held up for the YouTubers, um, that is the first 5 books. That's why it's so thick.
Wow.
I have
Okay.
another copy here. This is the one that I read to my kids when we were homeschooling. It was part of
Huh.
like Sunlight's kindergarten read aloud curriculum, actually. So I want to say I was probably like 7, maybe 7 or 8 when I read it for the first time. Might have been a little bit older, but I don't think so. I was pretty young. And it kind of set me on a quest to find as many of the Oz books as I could in the San Diego County public library system. And I loved Oz so much because it is so imaginative and
Mm.
different. And forgive me for saying this because it sounds negative and I don't mean it negatively, but it's so weird. It's just weird. The the
In the
world is
best kind of
weird
way, right?
in the best kind of way. And I was a weird kid. I'm a weird adult. And so it spoke to me. And something I didn't know at the time is that Baum, he would receive letters from his young readers, and he would sometimes incorporate their ideas into his subsequent stories. And so some of these really weird things that exist in the Oz universe are ideas that children had, and that's why they're
Oh,
so
that's
weird.
cool. Wow.
Yes, it's because a child's imagination, it is sort of unbound and just kind of,
Mhm.
goes to strange places sometimes. So that really spoke to me and kind of began my love for portal fantasy specifically.
Mm. Mhm.
And I think that because I was a kid who, maybe was sad in real life a lot, the idea of kind of going somewhere over the rainbow or through the
Mm.
looking glass or down the rabbit hole, like that really spoke to me. And I loved those stories where I felt transported in that very like concrete way because the main character is also being transported in, that portal fantasy sense. So when I wrote The Unraveling of Emmeline Dulaine, there's a very clear Oz reference in all of that. And by reference, I mean my main character literally dives into the Wonderful Wizard of Oz and spends like a quarter or so of the book in that story world. So there's a massive Oz tie-in there. And it was so cool to get to revisit portal fantasy because it's one of the first things that I fell in love with as a kid.
Yeah. It's funny, my wife tells the story of her dad was, like this kid when the movie The Wizard of Oz first came out.
Mm,
That was, like, the first movie that was in color, Technicolor,
yes.
right? So there was all
Mhm.
this hype, like, "This movie's in color," right? So her dad goes to see it, and, like, he was really I think he was, like, 6 years old or something crazy, so I'm thinking, like, "Why did your parents just let you go?" But, I guess that was the time, like, "Go be a man, son, you're 6. Go tend to the hog, go watch movies by yourself." So, anyways, but the cool thing is he goes and he heard all this hype and he goes to the theater and it opens up and it's in black and white, like the first part, right? And said he was so bummed out, like, "Oh, they told me this thing was gonna be in the color." Yeah, and then, of course, the big
False advertising.
yeah, false advertising. And then when she gets to Oz and the farmhouse door opens and all of a sudden, like, this burst of color, it's like, "Oh,
Ugh,
wow." Like, imagine audiences at the time, you've seen
right?
black and white, and all of a sudden, boom, Technicolor, and you're like, "Whoa." And that just
Amazing.
lend itself to the magic of this new land that you're going to. So, what a great
Yes.
movie to usher in, like, color movies, right?
Amazing. And if you've not read the original, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, in the book, Dorothy's shoes are silver. She has
Ah,
silver slippers. They're not ruby. But for the movie, they made them ruby because it was going to be Technicolor and that red
mm,
sparkle looked so
visual
good on
pop.
film. Yep.
Yeah.
Looked so beautiful. And so that's why we have ruby slippers. And those, of course, have become so much more famous than the original silver
Right,
slippers. But that's how you can always tell if somebody like is a book fan or a movie fan. I'm a fan of both personally. That was one of my favorite movies when I
yeah,
was a kid as well. But yeah, those silver slippers kind of just faded into obscurity because those red ones are so cool.
right, so vibrant. It's funny, it reminds me of Alice in Wonderland, the story,
Mhm.
just, like, getting
Yes.
swept away into this really weird 'cause, Alice in Wonderland is weird when you get there, like,
So
a
weird.
lot of crazy weird stuff going on. I tried to
Another
watch it again
favorite of mine.
recently. What's that?
Another favorite of mine. I
Oh,
loved
yeah,
that
well, there you
that
go, yeah. But I watched the cartoon again recently, and I'm like, "Okay, there's so much weird stuff going on." Like, I can't and I'm not just talking about the Mad Hatter, just everything is bonkers once they get there, but nevertheless very cool. Like we said, in the best sense of the word. Um,
Yes.
okay, well, I'm gonna show you my first favorite. Let's see if I can get the hardcover here. The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien. R.R. Tolkien. And this is like the case. It comes in this cool case. And for those of you just listening, it's like this really cool green, like a forest green hardcover. And it's got like this
Beautiful.
elvish writing along the border. And I think there's even illustrations in here. See if I can find one. I don't see any. Whatever. Well, there is. Trust me, there's some illustrations and they look cool. But anyways, yeah, here it is. And The Hobbit, probably, I would say, my most influential book that I've ever read. I found it in junior high. And it was just like an assignment from my teacher, my English teacher. And she goes, okay. Oh, whoa, I just hit my microphone. Sorry. And I'd never heard anything about it. I didn't know, and I hadn't really even read fantasy per se, except like maybe short little picture books or something. And I will never forget. I still remember, like you said, you have this memory burned in your mind at the library when you first picked up Wizard of Oz. I have a similar thing. I went to school and I was late. So at my junior high, for whatever reason, if you were late, they made you sit in like the principal's office or the school office to wait your next period of class. Yeah, to like rub it in, I guess. You delinquent. You have to sit next to the principal and sweat it out until next period. So anyways, so I was late. I had to sit there for the whole period. And so I'm like, well, okay, I got this new book in English class. I guess I'll flip this open and start to read a few pages. And I have never been so immersed in a book in all my life. I felt like everything around me, all reality just faded away. And I was in Middle Earth with the hobbits. And and then the bell rang and it was like coming up out of a pool, for air, like, oh, right. Oh, that's right. I'm in the school office. I have school today. Oh, here's my hands. I'm a human. It was like, it was so immersive. I lost all sense of where I was, and I was totally in the story world. And I'd never had anything like that before. And it was crazy. And then of course, as soon as I got a chance, I dove into the rest of the book and just lost myself. And I love that book so much. I didn't really care for the movie that much, but I did like the Lord of the Rings movies. The Lord of the Rings movies were pretty awesome, especially that first one is my favorite. But yeah, it's the book that really opened my eyes to what a book could do, like what was possible. Because I had read, I was a reader, but I read like, shorter books and chapter books and things like that. And I had never read a book quite like this. And it just really, let my imagination loose and just opened up the world. And it was fantasy, right? So it first kind of ignited my love of fantasy and fantasy stories. And just definitely huge impact, and loved it. And I still love it to this day.
That is one that absolutely holds up. And I honestly, if I had read The Hobbit as a child, it would 100% be on my list because it's one of my favorite books, but I didn't read it until I was an adult. And there's a lot of classics and the reason for this is because they just did not happen to be in my library. And so my local library branch just didn't have a copy of a lot of things that were like, so many kids, read them growing up, and I missed out on a bunch, but I have been backfilling, for like decades now. So The Hobbit is one of my all-time favorite books. I tried to read The Lord of the Rings first, and that was a mistake.
Oh, that was a mistake, yeah.
That was a mistake. I was like,
you got to ease your way in.
Yes. But I devoured The Hobbit first time I read it, and I've read it I don't know how many times since then, but love that story. And I love Middle Earth. I love that story world. And I think The Hobbit for me is like the best vehicle for Middle Earth. Lord of the Rings is fabulous and expansive and wonderful, but I just love the pace of The Hobbit.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, just love it and agree with you completely about the movies. Lord of the Rings movies are great. Hobbit movies, not so much.
Right. They tried to milk it too much. They're like, it's a short book. I know what we'll do. We'll split it into 3 movies. Like, what?
Yikes. Needed to be one movie. One movie. Really well-crafted movie. Stop adding stuff, guys. What are you doing?
Exactly.
Stop ruining perfection. Why?
Oh. All right. So we are moving on to you for your second book.
Yes. So I'm cheating. We talked about this in advance. Paul and I are both going to cheat a little bit today because we
Yep.
said 3 each, but
Right.
we're cheating. Okay. And I have chaos spread out all across my desk, which is not surprising. And I didn't even know for sure which 3 I was going to grab while we were on. So, okay, here we go. So, this is actually to represent 2 books, 2 different stories, but by the same author. So
Wait,
this
the
is
glossy, gleamy. It's.
I
I'm trying to
know.
read it.
I'm
The
so
light
sorry
keeps
for
hitting it.
our YouTubers. Okay, so there we go. I think I've got the glare off of it
Oh, that's
now.
better. Yeah.
This is called The Farthest Away Mountain, and it's by
Huh.
Lynn Reed Banks. Now, she is much better known for The Indian in the Cupboard.
Oh, right.
She's
Okay.
yes. So
I've
she's
heard
the
of that one.
author.
I haven't heard of the one you
Yes.
just put up.
Yes. I feel like few people have heard of The Farthest Away Mountain, but a lot of people have heard of Indian in the Cupboard. And I
Right.
found The Farthest Away Mountain because of Indian in the Cupboard. And so that's my cheat here is I'm using both of those stories and my copy of Indian in the Cupboard, because it is one that I did own as a kid. It did not survive childhood. It got ruined, which I was devastated by. But this one did. This is actually my copy from back in the day, my original here, and it cost $3.50, apparently, back in the day. So
Good
crazy.
deal.
I know, right?
That's the price for the paperback?
For the paperback,
Wow.
$3.50. We'll have to see what would that be with inflation, these
Back in
days.
my day, you could get a book for $3.
Right? Oh my goodness. And I did not open this. Okay, so for the YouTubers, if you can see that, that is my dad wrote that in there. I apparently stamped a little turtle stamp in here, and my dad wrote, "This book belongs to Lindsay Powell." And so for
Oh,
our YouTube watchers, you all can see my dad's beautiful handwriting. He's an illustrator, and so he has like
oh,
gorgeous
cool.
handwriting. Anyway, didn't know that was in there, but yes.
Sentimental
So
value.
yes, sentimental value. So anyway, Ending in the Cupboard was probably this experience you're describing of being captivated. I think that was the first book that did that for me. I think it's the first one I can remember. And that was something that my second grade teacher, so I would have been, what, 7, maybe? How old are we in second grade? Yeah, like 7, 8, maybe.
Mhm.
She read a chapter from Indian in the Cupboard to us every afternoon. Like at the
Hmm.
very end of the day, she would have all the little second graders come and sit, and she would read a chapter, or maybe even if it was less than a chapter. I can't remember, but I so clearly remember running up to the front of the group of kids so I could sit right by her feet where she was going to read aloud to us, and just listening to this story that I thought was so magical. And
Mm.
again, I think that I have a liking for stories where it is the fantastical that's touching the real world in some way.
Hmm.
And that was another thing about Indian in the Cupboard. It's not really portal fantasy, but it's like, little boy has this like cupboard, and he puts a plastic toy, he's playing cowboys and Indians or something, and he has this little plastic figurine, and he puts it in the cupboard, locks it, and that makes the little toy become real. So he then has, like a real little person when he opens the cupboard again. And so it was, again, a story where the fantastical was touching our real world. And I was just so immersed. And I was that very like nerdy kid sitting right by our teacher's feet and getting so mad at the other kids who would not settle down and be quiet and just like listen to the story. I was like, you guys, do you not understand? This is magic happening right now. Like, shut up. I need to hear every word of what's going on. So I looked up, oh my gosh, I just unlocked another memory of looking up at the computer. There was like this one computer at the library where you could go like look up, and it's this old like C prompt kind of a interface. It was like before Windows, because this would have been
Right.
the late 1980s, guys. And so I remember looking up this author and discovering some of her other work. And so The Farthest Away Mountain was the one that was my favorite throughout childhood. And that remained my favorite book probably until I hit my teen years. If you had asked me, what's your favorite book, I would have said The Farthest Away Mountain.
Is it a fantasy book?
Yes. So this one is actually probably the first kind of high fantasy book that I fell in love with, or that I can remember falling in love with. There may have been others before, but it's not that kind of fantastical touching, our real world. It is just straight up high fantasy. And it has like a quest, and there's, this girl trying to do this thing. And, it just has much more of that classic fantasy kind of feel to it. There was multicolored snow on this mountain, the Farthest Away Mountain. And that also really appealed to me. I am really visual and always have been. And so when a visual can take hold of me and sweep me away, then I'm kind of like sold. You've got me at that point as an author. If you can give me a really good visual that lights me up, I'm here for the experience. So this is one that I'm actually afraid to read. I've not read it as an adult because I'm afraid it's not going to hold up.
Right. Yeah.
I don't
Isn't
know
that a
if
shame?
it will.
I hate that feeling.
Right. I just don't want like my childhood memories to be,
I know.
destroyed. But I think I'm kind of in that place where even if I read it and it doesn't hold up for me, it'll be okay. I can still like separate that from what it meant to me as a kid. But I've avoided it for decades at this point because I just don't want to ruin it. It's perfect just as it is.
I just I'm going to show one of my books. I'm going to show you. I actually did that. I went back and I'm like, oh, darn it. It's not as good as I remember. But again, it spoke to me at that age. So,
Yes.
there's something to be said for that.
That's what it is. It's being the right book for you at the right time. It doesn't mean it's objectively the best thing that was ever written. Again, that's not really what we're going for, because what kind of bar is that? That's a crazy bar.
Exactly.
We're writing the best stories that we can at any given moment and hoping, and it will, that story will reach somebody right where they're at exactly when they need it. And that's kind of the most amazing thing that we can hope for as authors. And it's a perfect example of these stories hit us at the right time in our lives, and they spoke to us in those moments. So it doesn't matter if like craft wise or whatever, it doesn't hold up as an adult who now tells stories professionally. Like we're going to have a different perspective, but it doesn't take away really from the magic that we had when we first read them.
Yeah.
So how about you? What's your second book?
Second one. I'm going to try to I'm going to try not to knock anything over on my desk because this next one's a beast. Hold on. It's like heavy. I'm doing weightlifting. Okay. This is it. This is the full Chronicles of Narnia in hardcover. Can you look at the size of this? It's like a college textbook. But gorgeous. This has all the Narnian books, all 7. Is there 7?
Yes.
All of them in one. So kind of cool illustrations. Once again, I'm trying to show illustrations and I can't find any, but they're in there. Oh, wait, I found one.
Ooh.
Anyway, so there's stuff like that along the way.
Love it.
But, and then you got like this cool map on the back, right? So
cool.
Anyways, yeah. Again, we said we're sort of cheating on some of these, and this is like a cheat because it's really 7 books, not just one. But when I first read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that again was kind of a similar experience where I was really just whisked away to another world. And talking about being able to go back to books that you read as a kid, Narnia definitely holds up. Like I'll read it now and just be as enchanted as I was when I was a kid, which is crazy, because I'm so jaded now. But like, I don't know what it is about Lewis's magical world, the way he describes it, just the way he writes, it takes me right back to being a kid again. And I don't know how he does it. And it's just like, again, there's almost something magic about the way he writes about magical things. It's crazy. So, I really love those books. When I first started, I would always say like, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that's my favorite one of the whole series. I love it. But as I read through, and especially as I went back and read, my favorite now is The Magician's Nephew, which is kind of like the origin story because
Mhm.
I'm a sucker for origin stories. The origin story of Narnia and how it came to be, and how we got this portal into this magical world from our world, and just like really cool. So yeah, definitely Chronicles of Narnia. That's a standout for me.
That is a great one, and exactly the same as for Hobbit with me. This would be on my list if I had
Mm.
read it as a kid, but I read these
Oh,
for the
you didn't
first
read
time as
Narnia as a kid?
no, no.
Oh,
I
your
was in my
library didn't have
20s.
like so many good books. What is going
No.
on with that library?
I know. And it was kind of a small library, but still. And it could be that they were there somewhere and I just didn't stumble upon them. But this was so
Mm,
in the zone of what I was reading that I feel like if they were there, I would have found them, but maybe not. So I bet you they were in my school library and I just didn't like know to go looking for them.
mm,
But I loved Narnia books. When I first read them, I was in my 20s, I think. And I'm pretty sure I read them during middle of the night feedings with my second son, who is turning 21 soon. So that was how it's been a while since I first read them. And I
mm.
was still technically a young adult, maybe 22, 23 when I read those for the first time, but absolutely captivated me as a grown up reading for the first time and love, love, love that world and
Yeah.
what Lewis did with those stories. So definitely
And
holds up in my opinion.
they're sort of they're lighthearted, children's fiction. I put that in quotes because
Mhm.
there's such a depth underneath it all.
Mhm. Yes.
There's these great spiritual themes. There's these great just themes of family and courage, and like I mean I could go on and on, but like just, and as you read it, you can almost sense this depth underneath it all, and
Mhm.
it's just awesome. You know.
Yes. And there's like a humor to Lewis's writing as well,
Mm-hmm.
which I really
Mm-hmm.
appreciate. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think you kind of like stumbled on a really important point here is sometimes we sell children's fiction short of like that
Mm-hmm.
it can't do more than just, entertain or be,
Yeah.
it's for kids and therefore is not as deep, which is just not true. And a
Right.
lot of these books that do, hit us so hard when we're kids and then stick with us all the way into adulthood, it's because there's something that's being said in there. And so it just, it resonates and continues to resonate for many years to come. So yeah, children's fiction, young adult fiction, middle grade, now that we have this, as like a separate category in our modern fiction world, all of those categories can do so much more than people think that they can sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Lewis is a great example of that.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Time for your third choice.
All right, this is where the chaos ensues because what am I going to pick? I've got my little stack of like classics with my Anne of Green Gables and my Secret Garden and those sorts of things. But I think what
Uh,
I'm actually going to pick is some genre fiction. And again, cheating because this is like almost a whole category. But genre fiction that was super popular in the 80s and the 90s when I was a child. And so one of those things, this
uh,
says, let's see, Sweet Valley Saga. If y'all can see that, this is just nonsense. But this is one of the copies that survived all the way through adulthood. But if you know about Sweet Valley, there's Sweet Valley Twins, which we would now kind of call middle grade. There's Sweet Valley High, which we would call YA.
that's the one
And
I've
these
heard
were
of.
Yes, and I think that came first, and I think Sweet Valley High came first, and then Sweet Valley Twins was like when the twins who are in Sweet Valley High when they were younger, and these were some of the pioneers in the YA genre, like when
Mm,
that wasn't quite a term yet, and they were kind of forging that path for YA writers like me who were going to come. We were reading these as we were growing up, and of course, the Harry Potter series had a big was like a big final push towards making this like, a category that was going to stick around forever. But there were forerunners to what happened with Harry Potter, and Sweet Valley is one of those forerunners. So my sister and our library had a ton of these, and my sister is 3 years older than I am. So she was like reading Sweet Valley High while I was reading Sweet Valley Twins massively impactful in shaping me and like the audience that I was eventually going to end up writing for. And similar, Babysitter's Club, same era, and kind of like, those were on the little spinny racks at our library right next to the Sweet Valley Twins books. We had the Babysitter's Club books, and kind of the hitting that same target demographic and that same place for me. I mean, I was so invested with these characters. I think that's what really gripped me about these stories. And these are series that have dozens and dozens and dozens of books in them. And it's really the characters, I think, that pull you through, because you fall in love with these people and you get really invested in their stories. And this nonsense that I have still, this Sweet Valley Saga, which is this like kind of thick thing, and it goes through like different historical periods. So there's that glare again. But I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, this one down here is the twins' mom, I want to say. And so this is like mom and grandma and great grandma. So it's going back generations in this family and telling the story of these different generations throughout periods of history, and how, this family sort of came to be where it's at in this space where we know them as readers. And so again, really wonderful classic literature. Maybe not, maybe not so much. But it still was such a wonderful source of entertainment for me as a kid. And I loved it. I gobbled it up, and I could still tell you about Elizabeth and Jessica Wakefield, the twins from Sweet Valley. And I could tell you who they are and about their personalities and all of that. I remember decades later, I have not read a Sweet Valley book in years and years and years, and I can still tell you about these people and their friends at school, and who the bullies were and who the boyfriends were and all that. I mean, it's crazy, but really strong characters have the ability to do that, to kind of stick with the reader, even when you're not necessarily writing a big, great literary classic. You're just writing really entertaining fiction. And again, dealing with themes that matter. They talked about stuff like bullying and, first crush and stuff like that. It was so relevant to the audience who's reading those books. And so genre fiction can do all those things.
I was going to say, I've heard of these books. I think I heard of them growing up. I never read them, probably because I wasn't a 13-year-old girl, but
probably.
aren't they geared towards that young teen girl reader? And there's nothing magic, right? Isn't it just twins in high school or something?
Yep. These are contemporary fiction. And so, it's the Sweet Valley High is geared towards, my sister and I are both readers, and readers, we read up, right? So whatever age we are, we're always reading like a couple years beyond. So my sister was not in high school when she was reading those books, but and I was not in middle school when I was reading Sweet Valley Twins, but we're, a few years younger than that. But yes, speaking to all of those things that we as girls, were experiencing in school, these, fictional girls were going through a lot of the same things. And so, yes, definitely. This is why, yes, Paul did not read these, because they were targeting Lindsay and her sister, not so much Paul, but.
And I'm sure there's no drama at all in these books, right?
Oh, yeah. Super drama free. No, it's all about the drama. That's the point. The drama is the point.
That's funny. Well, very cool. Yeah. Actually, my wife told me about those books too. She grew up reading and loving them. And I'm like, I think there was a show I kind of remember. Didn't they turn it into like a TV show or something?
I think you're right. I had forgotten about that, but I think you're right. They did turn it into the Sweet Valley High ones. I think turned it into, it's probably like a CW type show, that kind of like really YA sort of thing. And they actually, for Babysitter's Club, this was really interesting. They brought that back, where those are still out there. But I noticed my daughter had like a Scholastic Book Fair thing that she brought home from charter school that we were attending at the time. And I opened it up, and there was the first book in the Babysitter's Club series. Crazy, 30 years after I had first read that book. But they had turned it into a graphic novel, which was fascinating to me, and kind of reaching that different generation with it. Same story. I'm imagining that they've maybe updated it a bit because certain things from the 80s are not going to translate to modern
Right.
kids, but they had put it in this whole new format, which I thought was really cool. I can't quite bring myself to read them in that format for some reason, but I'm really glad that it exists for this next generation to kind of discover in a new way. Is really cool.
Yeah, I have this joke that like if you go back and see a lot of movies or shows from like the 80s, like so many of their problems could have easily been solved if someone had a cell phone,
Just a cell
It's
phone,
just like
right?
they're always running, I can't get a hold of this person. Hurry, we got to drive here.
Right.
Like now like how about I just give them a text and,
Right? Like
problem
Home
solved.
Alone. Speaking of
Right.
Christmas, Home
Right.
Alone, which I mean, that movie released what, in 1990, I think.
I
And,
think so, yeah.
so yeah, I would have been like 8 or something when that movie came out. Love that movie. I still watch it every year
Sure.
at Christmas time.
Yep.
But yeah, that whole thing, if cell phones existed, I mean, mom's going to be tracking with the GPS location and like, texting Kevin, and we're going to, make sure that he's not home alone for
Right.
long. So yeah, that whole plot just completely falls apart. It's hard these days to write plot, like a contemporary modern day plot that has all of the obstacles and things that we need in order to
Right.
create an exciting plot with the technology that we have today. We have to be really creative to
Oh
do that.
yeah. Yeah. I had this mystery series that I wrote and it's in like this small mountain town. So anytime I want them to be in peril, I'm like, oh darn it, my signal's not working. My cell phone signal. What?
Perfect.
Why did I
Perfect.
go on this road again where the signal always goes out? Okay, I'm glad you shared those books because that helps me to share this because we're now going into like our sort of our guilty pleasure kind of books, right? Not
Yep.
classics.
Yep.
And that perfectly leads into my last one, which is I'm going to do two books because essentially they kind of did the same thing for me, as far as opening my mind up to what's possible with a genre that I already liked. And I'm going to show this on my tablet here. I don't know if you can see that. This one is called Another Fine Myth, and it's by an author named Robert Aspirin. I don't know if you're getting a glare off this, but
It looks good. Yeah.
and then similar to that is this book from Terry Brooks, and it's called Magic Kingdom for Sale. And I found Another Fine Myth when I was probably like early teen. So while you were reading Sweet Valley High, I was reading Another Fine Myth, which is a fantasy book, but it's funny. It's a humorous fantasy book,
Mhm.
and this hit me at a time when I was like, knee deep in, Lord of the Rings, and I found these other fantasy books like The Sword of Shannara and all these kind of cool. So I had already found this genre that I loved, fantasy, and all of a sudden I get to this book and it's like funny, and I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, you can have humor in fantasy books. This is cool. And the same thing with that Magic Kingdom for Sale book. So these books hit me at a time where I guess I just didn't even think that that was a thing, right? Because most of the fantasy I'd read had been very epic and serious, and like the world is crumbling and we must save it by sword and valor, and right. And then all of a sudden this one comes along and it's just real tongue in cheek, lighthearted, fun, funny adventure, and I'm like,
Yes.
oh wow, which is kind of what I write now. So this was kind of a big influence for me early on to show me like, oh, what you can do when you add humor into a genre you already love. And so, like the first books I published were humorous science fiction, and now I've moved into like humorous fantasy. But so those two books were really like, I guess, formative as far as opening my eyes to what you could do in a genre that you already loved. So yeah, there
Love
you go.
that. That's so cool. And this is something we both like to do. We both like to use humor in
Hmm.
our books. And I've noticed that as like a common thread between, our catalogs. And
Hmm.
that's like, I think something that you don't always realize as a fantasy author unless you have read, other books in the genre that do that, because fantasy does tend to have a really serious and epic tone to it. And
Yep.
that's great. That's totally fine for,
Yep.
those books that's what they're doing, or those authors who write that way. But if you are, the type to maybe throw in a joke or to have a little bit of humor or, to have the like funny sidekick type character or whatever in your story. It's really freeing to kind of see that in the genre, like, oh, I am allowed to do that. And
Yeah.
even because clearly I didn't only read fantasy, but I, read across a bunch of different genres as a kid. I never had like a hang up about putting humor into my fantasy when I started writing, but there was a barrier with my voice where I was trying to sound like more epic and more,
Yes.
something than I really was, because in my mind, well, that's what fantasy is supposed to sound like.
Same
It's
here. Same
supposed to,
here.
yeah, like fantasy voice, I call that now, where you're like trying to sound ethereal and very like big and epic and fancy. There's something fancy about it. And it actually took me writing a YA contemporary book. So very much in that sort of Sweet Valley High, a little bit different, probably more serious than a Sweet Valley High, but I wrote a YA contemporary novel kind of between my two big fantasy things that I was trying to get published at the time. And the second fantasy thing being The Story Peddler. But in between those, I wrote this YA contemporary piece. And on that book, I discovered my voice. And it was kind of that breakthrough moment where you
Mm-hmm.
go, oh, this actually sounds like me.
Mm-hmm.
And that felt natural in contemporary, but I'm looking at my fantasy manuscript going, oh, that's part of the problem with this one is it does not sound like me. It sounds like me trying to be fancy. And that's probably
Yes.
not what we want here, because it
Yep.
didn't sound authentic, because that's just not who I am. I'm not going to be writing the Tolkien Middle Earth, kind of a vibe. It's just not what I do. And so that was where, like in Story Peddler, I was able to kind of blend those two things, the fantasy, and you can have the epic quest and all of that, but having more humor and that voice that was more natural to me in there. And so it's so cool that you have these, like, these are the books that kind of facilitated that breakthrough for you with humor
Yeah.
in your fantasy. It gave you permission. You're allowed to
It
do that.
it totally did. Yeah. And it gave me permission, and it was just like, oh, I didn't even know you could do this. This is so freeing. And it's like
Yeah.
you said, when I first started trying to write fantasy, I did the same exact thing. I'm like, oh, I have to sound like Tolkien or Lewis. You have these big mentors, writing
Mhm.
mentors in your mind. And on the one hand, it's great because they're inspiring. But on the other hand, it's sort of like this comparison thing that can like crush you because you think, oh, I have to emulate them. It's like, no, they're there to inspire you, but like you got to be yourself. And it wasn't until I wrote, I think Space Drifters was the first time where I just thought, like, I'm just going to have fun with this. I'm just going to do this fun story. And I wasn't even thinking of like, oh, I'm going to publish this. So I got to do all these things. I just thought, like, I'm just going to write this and have fun and just like kind of be free and just be myself. And I don't even care. I think Tosca Lee has this great quote where she says, write like no one's going to read it. Where it's just like you're not worried about all the judges looming over you, watching
Mhm.
your every word. You're just like, you know what? I'm having fun with this, and I'm gonna just like enjoy the writing process and just have fun with my characters and not worry about all these other, judging voices or whatever. So there's definitely something powerful to that.
And that ended up being your breakout series.
Yep.
That was the one that
That's
got
the one that broke
contracted.
through.
That was
Yep.
the one, and it was the same exact thing for me, is the one that broke through was The Story Peddler, where I was like, fantasy and my natural voice, let's try this. And
Yeah.
it was the same thing. I'm just going to be free and natural and have fun with it. And that was the one, finally, that got contracted. And so we accidentally had this really important lesson for all of you writers out there. We were just doing this kind of fun, fluffy Christmas episode, but this is such an important thing
Yeah.
to take away, that
Yep.
just being who you are in your work is the thing that's actually going to break through and
Hmm.
set you apart with your readers, and just set you on that path. That's what it is. When we're not trying to sound like anybody else, we're not trying to emulate. We take the great things that we learned that resonated for us in other people's work, but then you just have to be yourself in how you execute those things in your own stories. And that's going to be when your breakthrough moment happens.
Yes. I can't add anything to that. That's perfect. I think we should stop right there because that kind of sums it all up, right?
Quit while we're ahead, man.
All right. Well, Lindsay, Merry Christmas to you and your family. Merry Christmas to everyone listening out there. And hope you have a great end of the year, New Year's, and all your holiday celebrations. And we will see you in 2026.